In the first two parts of this series, I've tried to do something that is often missing when tragedies like this occur. I've tried to slow things down. In part one, we looked at the environment, the escalation, the stress, and the pressure that was placed on everyone involved. In part two, we looked at the shootings themselves, not to simply assess guilt, but to understand how human beings behave under extreme conditions. Now, I want to step back and ask a harder question. Who benefits from environments like this?
Habla el molinero.
I want to remind you of a different incident that took place more than 5 years ago. Do you remember Kyle Rittenhouse? Kyle Rittenhouse was a 17-year-old from Antioch, Illinois, who crossed the border into Kenosha, Wisconsin in August of 2020 and was present at the scene of a violent protest. That was the summer of the George Floyd protests. Rittenhouse went to the scene armed with an AR-15 style weapon, ostensibly to protect a car dealership and provide emergency medical aid during the unrest. By the time the night was over, Rittenhouse had killed 2 people and wounded a third in physical confrontations with some of the rioters. Some people may object to my characterization of the victims as rioters, but buildings were set on fire that night and there was widespread looting, so whatever. And some will object to me calling the rioters victims, so what can I say? Others may think that I'm implying something else by referring to Rittenhouse's weapon as an AR-15 style weapon. But that is what it was. And believe me, invoking the name of George Floyd will ignite any number of differing emotions from those who remember that summer. The point is that none of it should have happened. Kyle Rittenhouse should not have gone into that chaotic scene armed with a rifle. Even if he had the best of intentions, it was a stupid choice by a 17-year-old kid. Authorities in Wisconsin and elsewhere should have made a better effort to control the violence that occurred that summer. And here I'm going to make a definitive statement of opinion for you to consider. The year 2020 was an election year. For many political figures, the larger point of the protests was to blame everything on Donald Trump, and it is my contention that some local and state authorities had political motives for allowing the riots to develop as they did. I'm not talking about the many peaceful protests that occurred. I am talking about the rioting and looting that happened, often in proximity to legitimate protests. I am also going to point out what I feel is a heavy dose of responsibility by some of the elected officials. For the purpose of brevity, I shall make Governor Tim Walz my principal whipping boy. During a primetime televised address on January 14, Walz told citizens that they should take out their phones and hit record. The purpose of that was so that residents could record atrocities perpetrated against the residents so as to create a database of evidence to be used in possible future criminal trials of ICE agents. Of course, it's not illegal to record police doing their work, nor is it illegal to tell people to do so. But there is something I want you to consider. There is little point to recording an officer simply taking in someone who has a legal ICE detention order against them. At least, there is little impact to it. In order to record atrocities, there have to be atrocities. It is my belief, my opinion, that in certain cases there are agitators, and sometimes paid agitators, whose goal is to provoke federal officers into violent acts for the purpose of discrediting the entire operation. Now, here is a really outrageous opinion of mine. Almost no one wanted this to happen. Renee Good and Alex Preddy didn't want to die. The ICE officers involved in the incidents didn't want to kill them. Neither Tim Walz, Jacob Frey, Kristi Noem, or President Trump wanted for people to die. I say almost no one because I also believe that there may be people who, given what I consider to have been the likelihood of something like this eventually happening, there were people who were more than happy to have a couple of martyrs to bolster support for their cause. But that's just a suspicion. So, now what? Consider the politics of the situation. Information is difficult for the ordinary Pablo to confirm. See my video about the Cartesian crisis. But even by the most cautious estimates that I could find, there have been at least 20,000 convicted criminals detained by ICE and Border Control agents. Of course, the federal government claims that that number is much higher, but I'm not here to dispute either side's figures. 20,000 is a pretty big number, and we should be glad that they are gone or soon to be gone. According to Minnesota's own statistics, there are 207 convicts in their prison system who are in the country illegally. I have to rely on AI for some of these figures, but it doesn't alter the larger point. Would it really be that terrible to collaborate with ICE on some of the obvious cases? Seems like a no-brainer to me to have people convicted of crimes by the state's own standards removed permanently. ICE has clearly stated that they will detain anyone found to be in the country illegally, and even I don't think that's entirely fair. But I have to leave that for another video. It's logical to believe that there would be fewer non-criminals caught in the net if local authorities would assist agents in locating legitimate bad guys. If you've watched all 3 parts and think this conversation is being mishandled elsewhere, consider passing this along to someone who might disagree with you. I am going to assert as factual that there are certain politicians who will resist anything having to do with Donald Trump. I believe that in many cases this is based on purely political considerations. I am not doubting the sincerity of their hatred, but I believe that there is a fear that if they show any cooperation whatsoever, any public approval on any subject, they shall be punished at the polls and risk their chance of re-election. Anyway, the subject of the hatred for Donald Trump shall have to be left for a separate episode. For now, this is Pablo El Molinero. Thanks for watching.
Pablo el Molinero, the honest reportero, crazy güero vaquero, straight shooter caballero.